Okay, what we're assembling today is the Pixel MegaTree kit 12 strip. So these are the components that we'll receive. We have power supply here, 350 watt, 12 volt. This is the Pixlite 16 output controller. These are the Pixel strips. This is a power cord. This is the extension or pigtail kit, and here's some shrink wrap tubing. So in the kit you actually get two of these power supplies, and the reason for that is because of the amount of power required to run these 12 strips. These strips are 38 watts each, and these power adapters are 350 watts output. So since you have 12 strips, you need two of those. You also get a total of 12 of these strips and 12 of these extension pigtails. You will get 2 of these extension cables, 12 shrink wraps to be able to waterproof all the connections that we're going to solder, and 1 of the controller boards. So with the power supply, all the connections are here. Here's our 16 output controller board. So we have 2 banks of power here, 1 through 8, 9 through 16 on this side. We will power both of these, again, because of the power requirement for this configuration. These are different fuses, and these are the different outputs that we will plug each of our Pixel strips into. What we're going to do with these 5-foot strips of extension cable, what we can do first is unwrap them and then just screw them together. This is just going to help us, because what we're going to do is find the center. So I'm just pulling it out, finding the center, and we're going to cut that. So what this allows us to now have is 2 equal length pieces of the extension cord. And what we will take, this female end, this will run off our Pixlite controller, and we'll take this male end and run it off our Pixel strip. And so we'll have to make some modifications to this strip to make that happen, and that's what we'll go through next. So we've cut our extension cord in half. We have our 2 halves here, and what I've done is just tin the tips with some solder. I've also stripped back the wire on the extension cable and tinned the tips there as well. So you want a couple inches here, because this is going to feed into the power supply, and just an inch or 2 here. Ultimately we will end up shrink wrapping this to help make it waterproof. So our next stage is with the Pixel strips themselves. So this type of connection doesn't work with our extension cable here, so we're simply just going to cut the end of this off. What I can do now is cut back this sheathing a little bit to allow me to get access to the connections that it was protecting. So what we have here are 3 different connections. There they are. What we're going to do is desolder those connections. That way we can put our extension cable on. So it should look like that, where the tips are no longer on there. And then what we do is we will take the male end, the one that has the prongs in it, just like you would if you were plugging something into a wall outlet, and we'll go ahead and wire these up here. So we've soldered the male end onto our Pixel strip here, and you'll notice that the 12 volt and the ground are on the same side, but we've elected to put the data injection on the opposite side. We found that this is just a little bit easier to maintain good connectivity, and you don't have to worry about putting the wrong connection on the wrong lead here. A little bit of overlap, so we just recommend that. And what we'll do is then we'll follow it up with some hot glue, and then we're able to put the shrink wrap on top of that. So we have soldered and hot glued our extension cord to the Pixel strip. One thing I would recommend is to put the shrink wrap tubing on before you do the solder. If you forget, you can completely unwind the roll and start from the on the other end to slide that back on. Ultimately, you will leave this connection here, and whenever you bring the shrink wrap down, be sure not to cover up any of your pixels. So just bring it past the connection point and right up to that first pixel there. That way you're not losing any of your strip. So here's one that's set up just like that, and the way we have it configured again is with the male end of the extension cable connected to the pixel strip, and the female end is what goes back to the controller. So the way that we connected this extension cord to the controller is via these little green clips that have these set screws in them that you back out. There is a specific sequence that information is included on how to connect these back up. And essentially, if we look at the one that we've already done, and be careful when you pull these out, you don't want to pull the cable out. So if you pull it from the base of the plastic instead of just yanking on the cord, you'll be less likely to pull these out. But what we see is, if we look at this as the first position, is we can see the power, the red cable running in here, and then we skip one, and then we have data, which is yellow, and then ground on the end there. So as we discussed earlier, this is the PixLite 16 controller. It has 2 power banks. We're going to ultimately have 2 power supplies for this pixel tree setup because there's a total of 12 strips. So we just have 1 bank running right now for the example, and what we'll do is we would have done this 12 different times for this specific configuration. Just make sure to screw that back in. So what I've done is I've attached the pixel strip to the controller so far. Another connection made to the controller is this Ethernet cable. That's what runs to the computer so that you can manage your sequences. And here's our power supply. What I have is just positive on this black cable and negative on this white cable, and it's running to the positive side and negative side on this power bank. Be sure to be mindful of that. I also have our extension, our power cord that was provided, and it's run into the line, neutral, and ground on our power supply. So what we'll find is that since this is connected to the computer, here's the fan on the power supply hookup, and I already had the software program configured, so we do get some illumination on our pixels there. This is a rainproof enclosure that we're going to assemble with a Pixel MegaTree setup, 12 strips. We're only going to set up 1 strip just to get an idea of how to set up the box. So there is a service entrance nut there. If this comes disassembled, you can just fasten the top onto the bottom. It just clips on here. And it also comes with these boards in order to be able to mount the power supply and the PixLite controller in some different configurations. And then you've got the mounting for the power supply, some nylon screws, and to mount it to the enclosure. And then you also have some washers and screws for the controllers to mount on that side. On the bottom of the enclosure, there are some gaskets here to help keep out moisture. And in order to connect everything to this, you'll want to find the best operation. So in our scenario, what we have is a PixLite 16 output controller. We'll have that over there. And we're also going to have a 350 watt 12 volt power adapter, power supply, that we're going to put on this side. So let's start off with the power supply. So this is part number 640, indicates it goes on the door. The only thing we're going to mount to this is the power supply. We're going to put it in a downward facing where the terminals are facing down. And on the back we have access holes that line up with these screw holes, and that's what we'll use the nylon screws for. So this is part 640. We have a pack here of the nylon screws and the metal screws that'll hold it to the door. With the nylon screws, you want to be careful not to over tighten them, as they can strip. Alright, that's nice and secure on there. What we can do is we can go ahead and mount that in our enclosure here. So we'll then take the metal screws that were provided in the kit and find the X's that are drawn on the plate, and we'll just screw down the 4 provided screws to make sure this is secured to the door. Alright, so that's nice and secure to the door. Now, onto the controller. This one can be a little bit more difficult because we have some washers to deal with, so we're going to try and keep it right off the surface. So let's move the enclosure out of the way and our extra screws. That's for a separate enclosure. And this is our kit that includes all the different washers and parts that we'll need to fix the controller board to the mounting board. So we do have an option with this to put the PixLite 4, the PixLite 16, or another power supply in this area if we wanted. And since we have the PixLite 16, we'll mount it. We're going to mount it in a configuration where the Ethernet port is facing down. That'll give access through these holes in the bottom. With the PixLite 16 controller now mounted to the board, we can go ahead and place this board into the enclosure. What you want to do first though is run your Ethernet cable so that you can plug it in here and then lay the board down in the box. So then we take the machine screws that are included in the kit and we go around the 4 corners and we'll secure this down in the enclosure as well. Now for this setup, the MegaTree with the 12 strips, we are going to use a second enclosure. Now we only need the 1 controller with this setup, but we do need 2 power supplies because of the limitation, because of the number of strips that we have. So what we're going to do is we're going to run these in tandem. We'll have another board on this door with the power supply, and what we'll do is we'll run a cable out of the bottom of this box over to this bank 2. But before we get to there, let's finish hooking up this first enclosure. So we have to go around and finish screwing in this board. I've also found sometimes it's easier to start the screws in the board and then lay the board in place. That way you're not fighting trying to get the screws in the holes, and I'm just feeding them in by hand, just a turn, just to get them started. And this optional enclosure really is a very nice way to secure these boards and also help weatherproof them. Alright, so now we've got our box and we've got these nice boards secured in there. So what we're going to run first is the power cable, and this power cable runs from the power supply over to this board. And so we have bank 1 over here. There's a positive and negative notation, so we want to make sure that we hook it up appropriately. In this case we're using black for positive and white for the negative side. And be careful when you're screwing these down, you don't want to over tighten, but you do want them to be snug. So this is where the PixLite 16 controller board gets its power from. It's going to get it from this power supply over here. Alright, so we've got a negative voltage and a positive voltage. So again, I'm going black to positive, white to negative. So then we also have our power cord for the power supply. So I'd already stripped this back and tinned the ends to make it easier. And so we've got about 5 feet here of length. What we'll do is we'll feed this in through the bottom, through some of these rubber grommets here, and we're going to feed it over to the power supply. So we have 3 lines here. We've got black, a white, and a green. So we're going to hook our black up to our live. We'll do white on neutral, and our green goes over to ground. This is the basic configuration that you're going to use with this enclosure. So we have a pixel strip that we've already set up. So this is ready to go, and we've got a male end here, but we have no way to hook this up to the controller board. So what we have to do is, here's the female end that we've already attached the green connection to. What you may find easy if you're going to run these through the bottom here is you have some options. You can either make a larger hole and come back with a grommet or something like that to try and make it weatherproof to fit these in, because these holes are too small. Or before you put these on, with your bare ends, you can go ahead and, just like with the power cable that we use for the power supply, you can feed these in without any of the modifications. And then once you get it inside, go ahead and make your green connections. For this illustration, I'm just going to take my power strip here. So I've got the male end, and we'll take this with the screws facing away from the board. So if it's on this side, the screws go that way. If it's on this side, the screws go this way. And we're going to find location number 1, which is up here at the top of the board, and we'll just go ahead and plug in there. And here's our lights. Now this is for a pixel MegaTree, and so we need a total of 12 strands. We've mentioned how there are power limitations that require us to run 2 power supplies. This enclosure is already full because we've got the controller and the power supply. So what do? Well, we've got a secondary enclosure. So this power supply is just running this bank of outputs, 1 through 8. That's the amount of power. We'd only be able to run these 8 outputs off this one power supply. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a second enclosure here, and we're going to mount a power supply on this side, just like we did with this one. The difference is, where we use this power cable here, on this other enclosure, we'll have to have a much longer power cable, because what we're going to do is, once this one is closed, we would then have the other power supply with its power cable running to an outlet. And then we'd also have another custom power cable that we're going to have to strip that would run from this box out of the power supply, and it would come back into the box with the controller. But when this one comes in from the secondary power supply, it goes into bank 2 to feed that. So now we have 2 power supplies running the 2 different banks, and that'll give us the appropriate amount of power to run 12 volts on all of the available outputs.